The morning sun barely peeked through the gray clouds as Janelle Williams rushed through the crowded airport terminal, her worn backpack bouncing against her shoulder blades with each hurried step. Her flight to Chicago was boarding in 20 minutes, and she still had to get through security. This wasn't just any flight. This was her chance at a new life. Janelle checked her watch again, a simple timepiece with a cracked face that had been her father's before he passed. 6 years as a nursing assistant working at 3 different care facilities had barely kept her and her grandmother afloat. The bills piled higher each month: grandmother's medicine, the leaky roof, the past due notices. But this interview in Chicago promised something better. A stable position with benefits and enough pay that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't need to choose between buying groceries or paying the electric bill. Just make it to gate B24, she whispered to herself, clutching her boarding pass tightly between fingers calloused from years of hard work. Just make it there on time. The security line moved at an agonizing pace. Janelle bounced on her toes, checking the large digital clock on the wall every few seconds. When she finally made it through, she grabbed her backpack and small suitcase and broke into a jog, weaving between travelers who seemed to have all the time in the world. Gate B24 was at the far end of the terminal. Janelle's lungs burned as she ran, the weight of everything riding on this one opportunity pressing down on her shoulders. The interview had been impossible to reschedule. "We have many qualified candidates," the clinic administrator had told her over the phone with a hint of dismissal in her voice. Janelle knew what that meant. They were doing her a favor by even considering someone with her background. As she rounded the corner toward the restrooms, something caught her eye. A figure slumped against the wall. Most travelers hurried past, eyes glued to phones or fixed, straight ahead. But Janelle's nursing instincts kicked in immediately. An elderly white man had collapsed near the entrance to the men's restroom, his face ashen gray, one hand clutching weakly at his chest. Janelle glanced at the time on her phone. 15 minutes until boarding. She bit her lip, calculating. The gate was still a 5-minute run away. "Sir?" she called, already slowing her pace. "Sir, are you all right?" The man's eyes fluttered open, cloudy blue and confused. He tried to speak but could only manage a wheezing sound. A thin trickle of sweat ran down his temple despite the airport's chill. 10 seconds passed as travelers streamed around them. Nobody stopped. Janelle set down her bags and knelt beside him. "I'm a nursing assistant. Can you tell me what's wrong?" The man's lips moved, forming words with great effort. "Can't breathe. Medication. In bag." Janelle noticed a leather briefcase, a few feet away. "This one?" she asked, already reaching for it. The man nodded weakly. 14 minutes until boarding. She opened the briefcase, quickly sorting through papers and a laptop until she found a small pill bottle. "Is this it?" she asked, showing him the nitroglycerin tablets. Another nod. Janelle helped him take the medication, then pulled out her phone. "I'm calling for medical help, okay? Just try to stay calm and breathe slowly." As she dialed for airport assistance, she noticed the man's expensive watch and tailored suit, now rumpled from his collapse. He wasn't just any traveler. This was someone used to first-class treatment, probably important in some company. But none of that mattered now. He was simply a person who needed help. "Airport emergency services, what's your situation?" "I've got an elderly man near the restrooms by gate B18 who appears to be having cardiac distress. He's taken his medication but needs immediate medical attention." 12 minutes until boarding. While waiting for help to arrive, Janelle loosened the man's tie and checked his pulse. Rapid but steady. She placed her hand on his shoulder and spoke in the gentle, reassuring voice she used with her most frightened patients. "Help is coming, sir. Just focus on your breathing. My name is Janelle. Can you tell me yours?" "Harold," he managed between labored breaths. "Harold Bennett." "Okay, Mr. Bennett. You're going to be fine. The medicine should start working soon. Can you tell me if you have any history of heart problems?" He nodded. "Bypass. 5 years ago." "That's good information to know. Are you traveling alone today?" Harold nodded again, his breathing becoming slightly less labored as the medication began to take effect. Was meeting someone in Chicago. 9 minutes until boarding. Janelle kept one eye on her phone's clock while monitoring Harold's color, which was gradually improving. She could still make it if help arrived in the next minute or two. My assistant, Harold said suddenly, his voice a bit stronger. Need to call? We can do that once the medical team gets here, Janelle assured him. Right now, let's just focus on getting you stable. 7 minutes until boarding. A small crowd had finally gathered, curious onlookers who hadn't offered help, but were interested now that someone else had taken charge. Janelle ignored them, keeping her attention on Harold. Is there any pain radiating down your arm or into your jaw? She asked, running through her mental checklist of cardiac symptoms. Not anymore, Harold answered. Just tired now. 5 minutes until boarding. Finally, 2 airport paramedics pushed through the small crowd with a wheelchair and medical kit. Janelle quickly briefed them on Harold's condition, the medication he'd taken, and his medical history as far as she knew it. You did good work here, one of the paramedics told her with an approving nod. Most people would have just walked on, by. Janelle smiled briefly, then checked her watch again. 3 minutes until boarding. I need to go, she said, gathering her bags quickly. I have a flight. Harold reached out suddenly and caught her wrist with surprising strength. His eyes, clearer now, fixed on hers with intensity. Thank you, he said simply. What's your name again? Janelle Williams. I hope you feel better soon, Mr. Bennett. And then she was running again, faster than before, her heart pounding as she dodged travelers and airport carts. Gate B-24 came into view just as she heard the final boarding announcement for her flight. Wait, she called out, waving her boarding pass as she approached. I'm here. The gate agent looked up with an expression Janelle had seen too many times before, that mixture of indifference and thinly veiled impatience. I'm sorry, ma'am. The boarding door is closed. FAA regulations. But I'm right here, Janelle insisted, catching her breath. The plane is still at the gate. The door is closed, the agent repeated, already looking past her to the next flight's preparations. You'll need to see customer service about rebooking. Janelle stood there, boarding pass, still extended as the reality sank in. She had missed her flight, the job interview, the chance at a better life. Is there another flight today? She asked, her voice smaller now. The agent tapped at her keyboard without looking up. Everything to Chicago is booked solid. There's one. Seat available tomorrow morning, but the fare difference would be $347. Janelle's stomach dropped. The entirety of her savings had gone into this trip. She didn't have another $347. She didn't even have another $47. Thank you, she said quietly, stepping away from the counter. Finding a seat at the empty gate across the hall, Janelle sat down, her bags, and tried to control the wave of disappointment threatening to overwhelm her. She would have to call the clinic and explain. Maybe they would understand. Maybe they would reschedule. But as she pulled out her phone, she already knew the truth. People like her didn't get second chances very often. The world didn't work that way. Still, as she thought about the elderly man's face and how alone he had looked on that floor, she couldn't bring herself to regret stopping. Her grandmother had raised her better than that. Some things are more important than interviews. She could almost hear her grandmother saying, some things are about who you are when nobody's watching. Janelle took a deep breath and dialed the Chicago clinic, preparing herself for disappointment but holding tight to her dignity. Whatever happened next, she had done the right thing. And sometimes that had to be enough. What she didn't know was that Harold Bennett was not just any elderly traveler. And this missed flight was not the end of her journey, but rather the beginning of something she could never have imagined. The paramedics had moved Harold Bennett to a small medical station tucked away in a quiet corner of the terminal. They checked his vitals while he sat upright on the examination table, his color much improved but his expression troubled. Your blood pressure is still elevated, Mr. Bennett, the paramedic said, removing the cuff. We strongly recommend you don't continue your travel plans today. Harold frowned, straightening his tie with practiced fingers. I have an important board meeting tomorrow morning, and I'd like you to be alive to attend it. The paramedic replied, unimpressed by whatever status Harold's expensive suit implied. We can arrange for a hotel nearby, or if you prefer, we can transport you to the hospital for further evaluation. Harold sighed, recognizing the wisdom in the advice even as it frustrated him. He reached for his phone. I'll have my assistant make arrangements. Thank you for your help. As the paramedics packed up their equipment, Harold's thoughts returned to the young woman who had stopped to help him when dozens of others had walked past. In his 40 years of business, he had developed a keen eye for character, and something about Janelle Williams had struck him immediately, a natural compassion combined with competence and quick thinking. These were rare qualities, in his experience, especially all found in one person. After making a brief call to his executive assistant, Harold asked the remaining paramedic, "The woman who helped me, Janelle Williams, do you know if she made her flight?" The paramedic shook his head. "I couldn't say, sir, but she was in quite a hurry." Harold nodded thoughtfully, then made another call, this time to his operations manager at the airline. Being the founder and majority shareholder of Horizon Airlines had its advantages, after all. Meanwhile, Janelle sat slumped in a chair at the customer service desk, holding her phone to her ear as the clinic administrator in Chicago delivered the expected news. "I'm very sorry, Ms. Williams, but we simply can't reschedule. The position needs to be filled by the end of the week, and we have other candidates already lined up for interviews tomorrow." Janelle closed her eyes, fighting back tears of frustration. "I understand. Thank you for the opportunity." The words tasted bitter in her mouth, but she managed to keep her voice steady. Her grandmother had always told her that dignity was sometimes all a person had, and nobody could take that away unless you let them. After ending the call, Janelle checked her bank account on her phone. $127.43 was all that remained after purchasing the now useless plane ticket. Not enough for another flight, barely enough for a bus ticket home. All the overtime shifts, the extra weekend work, the careful saving, all for nothing. Her stomach growled, reminding her that she'd been too nervous to eat breakfast that morning. The airport's overpriced food options were beyond her budget now, but she had packed a peanut butter sandwich that would have to do. As she reached into her backpack, her phone rang with an unfamiliar local number. "Hello?" she answered, trying not to sound as defeated as she felt. "Is this Janelle Williams?" asked a friendly female voice. "Yes, this is she. My name is Diane from Horizon Airlines Customer Relations. We understand you missed your flight to Chicago earlier today?" Janelle straightened, a small spark of hope igniting. "Yes, I did. I was helping an elderly man who had collapsed near gate B18. That's exactly why I'm calling. The gentleman you assisted has asked if you would be willing to meet with him. He's in our premium lounge and would like to thank you personally." Janelle blinked in surprise. "Oh, well, I'm just trying to figure out how to get home now. My interview in Chicago was canceled." "I understand completely," Diane said, her voice warm with sympathy. "But Mr. Bennett was quite insistent, and he mentioned something about possibly helping with your situation. Would you be willing to meet with him? I can escort you to the lounge personally." With nothing to lose and nowhere else to be, Janelle agreed. 20 minutes later, she found herself being led through the airport terminal to an unmarked door with a subtle Horizon Airlines logo. Diane swiped a keycard, and the door opened to reveal a world Janelle had only glimpsed in movies, a luxurious lounge with plush seating, soft lighting, and smartly dressed travelers enjoying complimentary food and drinks. Diane led her through the lounge to a private seating area in the back, where Harold Bennett sat in a comfortable armchair, looking much improved from their earlier encounter. He stood when he saw her, extending his hand. "Ms. Williams, thank you for coming. Please have a seat." He gestured to the armchair across from his. "Can I offer you anything? Food? A drink?" Janelle hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "Actually, I am pretty hungry. I missed breakfast this morning." Harold smiled and nodded to a nearby attendant who approached immediately. "Would you please bring Ms. Williams a menu? And I'll have another tea." As the attendant departed, Harold turned his attention back to Janelle. "First, I want to properly thank you for your help earlier. The paramedics told me that your quick actions likely prevented a much more serious episode. Janelle nodded, feeling slightly uncomfortable with the formal thanks. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't, Harold said quietly. I counted 17 people who walked right past me before you stopped. That says something about who you are, Ms. Williams. The attendant returned with a leather-bound menu, which Janelle accepted with surprise. The prices were not listed, which immediately made her nervous. I don't want to impose. Please, Harold insisted. Order whatever you'd like. It's all complimentary in the lounge anyway. Relieved, Janelle ordered a chicken sandwich and a coffee. As the attendant left again, Harold leaned forward slightly. I understand you missed your flight because you stopped to help me. Janelle shrugged, trying to appear more casual about it than she felt. It happens. Was it important? Your trip to Chicago? Something in his gentle questioning broke through her practiced composure. It was a job interview, a really good position at a medical clinic, better pay, benefits, regular hours. She swallowed hard. They won't reschedule. Harold nodded thoughtfully. And the financial loss of the ticket? I imagine that's significant as well. Janelle looked down at her hands, calloused and strong from years of lifting patients and changing beds. I'll figure something out. I always do. I have no doubt, Harold said. But I'd like to help if you'll allow me. Janelle looked up, suspicion automatically flickering across her features. In her experience, offers of help from wealthy strangers often came with uncomfortable strings attached. Reading her expression perfectly, Harold smiled. No strings, Miss Williams. Just an old man who's grateful and in a position to show that gratitude in a meaningful way. Before she could respond, a tall man in an impeccable suit approached their table, holding a leather folder. Harold waved him over. Ah, Robert, excellent timing. Ms. Williams, this is Robert Chen, my executive assistant. Robert, this is Janelle Williams, the young woman I told you about. Robert gave her a warm smile and a respectful nod. Ms. Williams, it's a pleasure. Mr. Bennett speaks very highly of you. Robert, were you able to arrange everything? Harold asked. Yes, sir. Everything is confirmed. Robert handed the leather folder to Harold, who opened it and reviewed its contents with a satisfied nod. Perfect. Harold turned back to Janelle as the attendant arrived with her food. He waited until she had taken a few bites of her sandwich, which was possibly the best chicken sandwich she'd ever tasted, before continuing. Ms. Williams, I'd like to make you an offer. Inside this folder is a first-class ticket to Chicago on our 7:15 p.m. flight tonight. There's also a confirmation for a room at the Palmer House Hotel downtown, and a car service that will take you from the airport to the hotel, and then to your interview tomorrow morning. Janelle stopped chewing, her eyes widening in disbelief. But I told you they canceled the interview. Harold's eyes twinkled. Yes, well, it seems the clinic has reconsidered. Robert made a call to Dr. Patrice Henderson, the clinic director, explaining the circumstances of your missed flight. She was quite impressed by your actions and has agreed to meet with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. Janelle set down her sandwich, her appetite forgotten in the rush of emotions. I don't understand. How did you... Ms. Williams, Harold said gently. I haven't been entirely forthcoming about who I am. My name is Harold Bennett, and I founded Horizon Airlines 38 years ago. While I'm semi-retired now, I still hold considerable influence within the company and it seems within Chicago's medical community as well. Janelle felt the room spin slightly. The airline. The man she had helped owned the very airline whose flight she had missed. This is too much, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't accept all this. You can, and I hope you will, Harold replied. I've spent my life building a company based on the principle that how we treat each other matters. Today you exemplified that principle when you chose to help a stranger at significant personal cost. He pushed the folder gently toward her. This isn't charity, Ms. Williams. Think of it as an investment in the kind of world I want to live in, one where kindness and character are recognized and rewarded. Janelle stared at the folder, her mind racing. This kind of thing didn't happen to people like her. Life had taught her that hard work often went unnoticed and unrewarded, that systems were designed to keep people in their places. And yet, here was this man offering her a second chance she desperately needed. "I don't know what to say," she admitted finally. "Say yes," Harold suggested with a smile, "and then finish your lunch. First class has excellent food, but it's a good policy never to pass up a meal when it's offered." A laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep inside her, breaking through the tension. "My grandmother says the same thing." "Smart woman, your grandmother." Harold nodded approvingly. "Is she the one who taught you to stop and help strangers?" Janelle smiled, thinking of the strong, loving woman who had raised her after her parents died. "She taught me everything important. How to work hard, how to keep your dignity when the world tries to take it from you, how to be kind even when life isn't." "I'd like to hear more about her," Harold said, settling back in his chair. "We have some time before your flight." And so, as Janelle finished her meal, she found herself sharing stories about her grandmother, about growing up in a small apartment filled with more love than money, about her doctor, Eames of someday opening a community health clinic in her neighborhood where people without insurance could receive quality care. Harold listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and sharing a few stories of his own, about starting Horizon Airlines with just 2 small planes, about the early struggles and the hard lessons learned, about his late wife who had been his partner in both business and life. By the time Robert returned to escort Janelle to her gate, 3 hours had passed. In what felt like minutes, as they said goodbye, Harold took her hand in both of his. "Whatever happens in Chicago tomorrow, Ms. Williams, I want you to remember that you have exceptional qualities that are far too rare in this world. Don't let anyone make you doubt your worth." Janelle blinked back unexpected tears. "Thank you, Mr. Bennett. Not just for the ticket and the hotel, but for seeing me. Most people don't." "Their loss," Harold said simply. "Safe travels, Janelle, and good luck tomorrow, though I suspect luck has very little to do with what lies ahead for you." As Janelle followed Robert through the terminal toward her gate, she felt something she hadn't experienced in a very long time, a lightness in her step, a sense that maybe, just maybe, the universe occasionally balanced its accounts after all. The first-class experience was unlike anything Janelle had ever known. From the moment she settled into the wide leather seat, flight attendants appeared with offers of drinks, warm towels, and menus. The woman seated across the aisle, dressed in an expensive-looking business suit, didn't even look up from her laptop when the attendant addressed her. But Janelle couldn't help smiling and thanking each person who helped her, earning warm responses. In return, "First time in first class?" asked a kind-eyed flight attendant named Luis as he offered her a glass of orange juice. "That obvious, huh?" Janelle laughed softly. "Only in the best way," Luis assured her. "The frequent flyers barely notice us anymore. It's nice to serve someone who actually seems happy to be here." As the plane took off, Janelle gazed out the window at the shrinking city below. Just this morning she had been racing through that airport, every penny scraped together for a coach ticket and a slim chance at a better future. Now she was flying first class to Chicago, staying in a fancy hotel, and had her interview back, on the calendar. All because she'd stopped to help someone in need. Her grandmother would say this was the universe's way of recognizing good hearts. Janelle wasn't so sure about that. She'd seen too many good hearts broken by an indifferent world. But for once she allowed herself to simply accept the gift without questioning it. The flight passed in a blur of comfort. She ate a meal that rivaled any restaurant she'd been to, watched a movie on the screen built into her seat, and even managed to doze off in the reclining chair that transformed nearly into a bed. When they landed in Chicago, Luis wished her good luck on her interview. "Mr. Bennett must think very highly of you," he said with a knowing smile. "He doesn't often arrange special flights for people." Janelle blinked in surprise. "You know Mr. Bennett?" "Everyone at Horizon knows Mr. Bennett," Luis replied. "He makes a point of flying with us regularly and actually talking to the staff. Most founders forget about the people who keep their companies running once they make it big, not him." This small insight into Harold's character made Janelle smile. Her instincts about him had been right. True to Harold's promise, a driver was waiting for her at baggage claim, holding a sign with her name. The car was sleek and black, with leather seats and bottles of water in a small cooler. As they drove toward downtown Chicago, Janelle pressed her face to the window like a child, taking in the towering skyline and the vast expanse of Lake Michigan. "First time in Chicago?" the driver asked, catching her expression in the rearview mirror. "Yes," Janelle admitted. "I've never been north of Tennessee before." "Well, you picked a good time to visit. Not too hot, not too cold, though that'll change soon enough once winter hits." The Palmer House was like something from another world, a grand lobby with a painted ceiling that reminded Janelle of pictures she'd seen of European palaces, uniformed staff who addressed her as Ms. Williams, and a room that was bigger than the entire first floor of her grandmother's house. She walked around it in silent awe, touching the thick curtains, the plush bedspread, the marble countertop in the bathroom. The digital clock on the nightstand read 9:37 p.m. Janelle realized she should call her grandmother, who would be worried by now. She took out her phone and dialed the familiar number. "Nana? It's me." "Janelle." "Child, I've been worried sick. You were supposed to call when you landed in Chicago hours ago." Janelle smiled at the concern in her grandmother's voice. "I'm sorry, Nana. Something happened. Something good but kind of unbelievable." Over the next 20 minutes, she told her grandmother the whole story. Helping Harold, missing her flight, the unexpected meeting in the airline lounge, and the extraordinary generosity that had followed. There was a long pause when she finished. "Nana, are you still there?" "I'm here, baby," her grandmother said, her voice thick with emotion. I always knew your good heart would be recognized someday. I just didn't expect it quite like this. I keep thinking I'll wake up and find out it was all a dream," Janelle admitted. "Well, dream or not, you make sure you ace that interview tomorrow. This Mr. Bennett saw something special in you, and now this clinic needs to see it too." "I will, Nana, I promise." "And Janelle, I'm proud of you. Not because of the fancy flight or the hotel, but because when it mattered, you showed who you really are. That's worth more than any job." After saying goodnight, Janelle prepared for bed, carefully laying out her one interview outfit, a simple navy blue skirt suit she'd found at a thrift store and tailored herself. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, professional, and the best she had. She reviewed her notes on the clinic one more time before setting the alarm and sliding between the softest sheets she'd ever felt. Despite her exhaustion, sleep came fitfully. Every time she drifted off, she'd jerk awake with anxiety about the interview or disbelief about the day's events. Around 2 a.m., she finally gave up and ran a bath in the enormous tub, soaking in the hot water until her tense muscles relaxed. "Whatever happens tomorrow," she told herself. "You've already had an adventure most people never get. Be grateful for that." Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the gap in the curtains. Janelle dressed carefully, applied her minimal makeup, and pinned her hair back neatly. The woman who looked back at her from the mirror appeared, confident and professional, though inside she still felt like the nursing assistant from a struggling neighborhood who didn't belong in this luxury hotel. The car was waiting for her at 9:15, exactly as promised. The clinic was located in a modern building near the lake, its glass front reflecting the water and sky. As the driver pulled up to the entrance, Janelle took a deep breath. "You've got this, miss," the driver said encouragingly. "And I'll be right here waiting when you're done." The clinic's reception area was bright and welcoming, with comfortable seating and art on the walls. Janelle approached the front desk, straightening her shoulders. "Good morning, I'm Janelle Williams. I have an appointment with Dr. Henderson at 10. The receptionist looked up with a warm smile. "Yes, Ms. Williams, Dr. Henderson is expecting you. Please have a seat, and she'll be with you shortly." Janelle had barely settled into a chair when a tall black woman in a white coat emerged from a hallway. "Ms. Williams, I'm Dr. Patrice Henderson. Thank you for coming in today." Dr. Henderson's handshake was firm, her gaze direct but kind. She led Janelle to a spacious office with views of the lake and gestured for her to sit in one of the chairs facing the desk. I understand you had quite an adventure getting here, Dr. Henderson said, sitting down across from her. Janelle nodded. It's been an unexpected journey, that's for sure. Well, I must say, when Harold Bennett calls personally to recommend someone, it gets my attention. He's been a major donor to our community outreach programs for years. Janelle's eyes widened, slightly. This connection hadn't occurred to her. But, Dr. Henderson continued, while Mr. Bennett's recommendation opened the door, this interview is about your qualifications and whether you're a good fit for our team. So tell me about your experience as a nursing assistant and why you're interested in this position. For the next hour, Janelle described her work in various care facilities, her additional training in patient advocacy, and her passion for community health. Dr. Henderson asked thoughtful questions that allowed Janelle to showcase not just her technical skills, but her approach to patient care. What would you say is the most important quality in someone working directly with patients? Dr. Henderson asked. Janelle considered the question carefully. Empathy with boundaries, she finally said. You have to genuinely care about people's pain and fears to connect with them, but you also need healthy boundaries so you can make clear decisions and not burn out. It's a balance I work on every day. Dr. Henderson nodded approvingly. That's an insightful answer. Many people just say, compassion without recognizing the complexity. As the interview continued, Janelle began to feel more at ease. Dr. Henderson wasn't just asking standard questions from a list. She seemed genuinely interested in understanding who Janelle was as a healthcare provider and as a person. One last question. Tyan, Dr. Henderson said, leaning forward slightly. Our clinic serves a diverse population, including many patients who face significant socioeconomic challenges. How does your background inform your approach to these patients? Janelle took a deep breath. This was where she usually hesitated in interviews, unsure how much of her personal story to share. But something about Dr. Henderson's direct gaze encouraged honesty. I am these patients, she said simply. I grew up in a neighborhood where healthcare was something you sought only in emergencies because it was too expensive otherwise. My grandmother raised me after my parents died, and I watched her ration her blood pressure medication to make it last longer. I became a nursing assistant because I wanted to be part of making healthcare more accessible and humane for people like us. She paused, then added, I don't believe my background makes me better than someone who grew up with more advantages, but it does give me a perspective that can't be taught in school. I understand the pride that keeps people from asking for help, the fear of being judged, the calculations people make between buying food or medicine. That understanding creates trust with patients who often feel invisible in the healthcare system. When she finished, Dr. Henderson was quiet for a moment, studying her with an expression Janelle couldn't quite read. Then she smiled. Ms. Williams, I think you might be exactly what this clinic needs. Let me show you around the facility, introduce you to some of the staff, and we can discuss the specifics of the position in more detail. For the next 2 hours, Janelle toured the clinic, met nurses and doctors, and administrative staff, and learned about their community programs. The more she saw, the more she wanted to be part of it. This was a place that aligned with her values, that served people who reminded her of her own community back home. When they returned to Dr. Henderson's office, the doctor closed the door and sat down with a smile. I'm prepared to offer you the position, Ms. Williams. The starting salary is $58,000 annually, with full benefits including health care, retirement contribution, and 3 weeks of paid vacation. We also offer tuition assistance if you decide to pursue further education in nursing or healthcare administration. Does that sound agreeable to you? Janelle tried to keep her expression professional, but inside she was reeling. The salary was more than double what she currently earned, and the benefits package was beyond anything she'd ever been offered. It would mean not just a better life for herself, but the ability to finally provide properly for her grandmother. That sounds very agreeable, Dr. Henderson. Thank you for this opportunity. I won't let you down. I don't believe you will, Dr. Henderson replied. There's just one more thing we need to discuss. The position is here in Chicago, which would mean relocating from... She glanced down at Janelle's resume. From Memphis. Is that something you're prepared to do? Janelle hesitated. In all the excitement, she hadn't fully considered the practical implications of taking a job in Chicago. Moving would be expensive. Finding an apartment, transporting what few possessions they had, and most importantly, bringing her grandmother to a new city where she knew no one. "I would need to bring my grandmother with me," she said slowly. "She raised me and now she needs my care. I couldn't leave her behind." Dr. Henderson nodded. "Of course. Family is important. The clinic actually partners with a senior living community, not far from here. Many of our staff have parents or grandparents living there. It offers independent apartments with medical support available as needed. Perhaps that might be an option worth exploring. That sounds wonderful, but I'm not sure we could afford something like that right away, even with this generous salary." "Let's cross that bridge when we come to it," Dr. Henderson said kindly. "For now, why don't you take some time to think about the offer and discuss it with your grandmother? We can talk again tomorrow before you leave Chicago." Janelle agreed, and they shook hands again, this time with the warmth of potential colleagues rather than interviewer and candidate. As promised, the driver was waiting when Janelle emerged from the clinic. She slid into the back seat in a daze, her mind spinning with possibilities and challenges. "How'd it go?" the driver asked as he pulled away from the curb. Janelle looked out at the Chicago skyline, so different from the familiar landscape of home. "They offered me the job," she said quietly. "Congratulations, that's great news, right?" "It is," she agreed, though her voice remained thoughtful. "It's just, it would mean moving my whole life here. My grandmother, too." The driver nodded understandingly. "Big changes are always scary, even when they're good changes. But you know what? Chicago's a pretty special place once you get to know it." Janelle smiled faintly. "I'm starting to see that." Back at the hotel, she called her grandmother with the news. To her surprise, Nana was immediately enthusiastic about the move. "Child, there's nothing holding us in Memphis except memories and my arthritic bones. If this job is what you want, we'll make it work. I'm not so old that I can't handle a little adventure." Janelle laughed through sudden tears. "You're sure? It would be a big change." "Life is change," her grandmother said firmly. "And it sounds like this change might be a blessing we've been waiting for." As evening fell, Janelle stood at the window of her hotel room, watching the lights of Chicago come alive. Tomorrow, she would give Dr. Henderson her answer, and then fly back to Memphis to begin the enormous task of uprooting their lives. It was terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. She opened it to find a simple message. "I hope Chicago is treating you well. Would you have time for breakfast tomorrow before your flight home? Harold Bennett." Janelle stared at the message in surprise. With everything that had happened at the clinic, she had almost forgotten the extraordinary circumstances that had brought her here. She quickly typed a response. "Chicago has been amazing. Breakfast sounds wonderful. Thank you again for everything." Within seconds came the reply, "Excellent. 8 a.m. in the hotel restaurant. I have some ideas I'd like to discuss with you." As she set her alarm for the morning, Janelle wondered what new surprises tomorrow might bring. In just 2 days, her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. And somehow, she sensed that the story was far from over. The Palmer House restaurant gleamed with polished wood and crystal in the morning light. Janelle arrived 5 minutes early, dressed in her interview suit again, the only professional outfit she had packed. A hostess immediately approached with a warm smile. "Ms. Williams, Mr. Bennett is already seated and expecting you. Please follow me." Harold rose from a table by the window as Janelle approached. He looked much better than he had at the airport, his color healthy, his movement steady. He wore a casual but clearly expensive sweater, rather than the business suit from yesterday. "Janelle, good morning," he greeted her, extending his hand. "You look well rested. I hope the accommodations were satisfactory." "More than satisfactory," Janelle said with a smile as they both sat down. "I've never stayed anywhere so nice." A waiter appeared almost immediately with coffee. "May I bring you anything else to drink? Orange juice, perhaps? Or a smoothie?" After They ordered breakfast. Harold leaned forward slightly. Tell me about your interview. I received a brief call from Patrice, Dr. Henderson, yesterday afternoon, but I'd like to hear your perspective. Janelle took a sip of her coffee before answering. It went really well. Better than I expected, honestly. Dr. Henderson offered me the position. Harold's face brightened. Excellent. I knew she would see in you what I saw. Patrice has an exceptional eye for talent. He studied her expression for a moment. But I sense there's something more on your mind. Janelle hesitated, then decided on honesty. The job is amazing, better than anything I could have hoped for, but it would mean moving to Chicago, bringing my grandmother. It's a big change with a lot of practical challenges. Harold nodded thoughtfully. Change always comes with challenges, but in my experience, the biggest regrets come not from changes that were difficult, but from changes we were afraid to make. Their food arrived, an omelet for Harold, Belgian waffles with fresh berries for Janelle. They ate in companionable silence for a few moments before Harold spoke again. I mentioned that I had some ideas to discuss with you. Before I do, I'd like to ask what you've decided about the position. I'm going to accept it, Janelle said firmly. My grandmother and I talked last night and she's supportive. It will be complicated to arrange the move, but the opportunity is too good to pass up. Harold smiled approvingly. I'm glad to hear that. And as it happens, the ideas I wanted to discuss might help with some of those complications. He set down his fork and folded his hands on the table. Janelle, in our conversation yesterday, you mentioned your dream of someday opening a community health clinic in your neighborhood. I was struck by the clarity of your vision and your understanding of what such a community needs. Janelle nodded, wondering where this was going. Horizon Airlines has a foundation that focuses on community development in underserved areas. One of our initiatives is healthcare access. We partner with existing hospitals and clinics to create satellite locations in neighborhoods that lack adequate services. Janelle's eyes widened slightly. That sounds amazing. It's been quite successful in several cities, but we haven't yet established a program in Memphis, Harold continued. I spoke with our foundation director last night, and we believe your neighborhood might be an excellent location for our next project. Janelle set down her coffee cup, stunned. Are you saying you want to open a clinic in my neighborhood? I'm saying the foundation wants to explore the possibility, and we'd be very interested in your insights as someone who knows the community intimately. Harold's eyes twinkled. Of course, such a project would also need local healthcare professionals who understand both the medical needs and the cultural context of the community. Like nurses, Janelle said softly, beginning to understand. Precisely, like nurses who might want to return to their community after gaining valuable experience at a progressive clinic in Chicago. Janelle's mind raced with implications. So you're suggesting that I take the Chicago position, but with the possibility of eventually returning to Memphis to work at this new clinic? That's one possibility, Harold agreed, though there are many ways this could unfold. The important thing is that your career path wouldn't have to be limited to a single location. He paused. But first things first. You need to get established in Chicago and focus on excelling in your new position. The waiter appeared to refill their coffee cups. When he departed, Harold continued in a more practical tone. Now, about the logistics of your move. I understand your grandmother will be joining you, Janelle nodded. Yes. She raised me after my parents died, and now she needs my support. Dr. Henderson mentioned a senior living community that partners with the clinic, but I'm not sure we can afford it right away. I believe you're referring to Lakeside Gardens, Harold said. It's an excellent facility. My sister-in-law lived there for several years. As it happens, Horizon's Foundation is one of the major supporters of their subsidy program for families of healthcare workers. Janelle stared at him, hardly daring to hope. Are you saying my grandmother might qualify for subsidized housing there? I'm saying it's very likely, Harold replied with a smile. And as for the costs of relocating, the clinic typically offers a relocation package for new employees. I took the liberty of discussing this with Patrice, and she's prepared to include that in your offer. Tears pricked at the corners of Janelle's eyes. Mr. Bennett, I don't know what to say. This is all so much. You can say you'll accept all the help that's being offered, Harold said gently. Not as charity, but as recognition of your potential and the difference you can make in people's lives. He reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card, sliding it across the table. This is my private number. When you're settled in Chicago, I hope you'll stay in touch. My wife passed away 5 years ago, and I find I enjoy the company of people who have interesting perspectives on the world. People like you, Janelle. Janelle took the card, touched by the gesture. I'd like that. Good. Harold glanced at his watch. Now, I believe you have a meeting with Patrice at 11 to finalize details, and then a flight back to Memphis this afternoon? Janelle nodded. Then we should finish our breakfast. The car will take you to the clinic, and then to the airport. Afterward, he picked up his fork again, then paused. One more thing. The foundation would like to send a team to visit your neighborhood in Memphis next month to begin exploring the clinic possibility. Would you be willing to connect us with community leaders who might help us understand the specific needs? Of course, Janelle said eagerly. My grandmother knows everyone. She's been a member of the same church for 40 years, and she used to work at the elementary school. She can introduce you to all the right people. Perfect. Harold smiled. I look forward to meeting her someday. As they finished their meal, the conversation shifted to lighter topics. Harold's grandchildren, Janelle's favorite books, their shared love of old jazz music. By the time they said goodbye in the hotel lobby, Janelle felt as though she'd known him for years rather than days. Thank you, she said simply, extending her hand. Not just for everything you've done, but for seeing possibilities I couldn't see myself. Harold clasped her hand warmly. That's the thing about possibilities, Janelle. They're always there, waiting. Sometimes we just need help bringing them into focus. As the car drove her to her meeting with Dr. Henderson, Janelle gazed out at the Chicago skyline, which already looked somehow more familiar than it had yesterday. The enormity of the changes ahead was still daunting, but now the path forward seemed illuminated, each step visible and achievable. Her meeting with Dr. Henderson was brief but productive. The relocation package was indeed included in the formal offer, along with assistance in finding temporary housing until her grandmother could join her. They agreed on a start date 4 weeks away, giving Janelle time to wrap up her life in Memphis and make the move. I'm delighted you're joining us, Dr. Henderson said as they shook hands. And I'm intrigued by Harold's idea about a potential clinic in Memphis. He's never steered us wrong before. Janelle smiled. I'm starting to think that might be impossible. Has he always been this involved in helping people? Dr. Henderson laughed. Always. Though he seems particularly invested in your case. Harold has always had an uncanny ability to recognize potential, both in business ventures and in people. It served him well. After the meeting, the car took Janelle to the airport, where she was once again escorted to the first-class lounge to wait for her flight. She used the time to call her grandmother with all the new developments. Nana, you won't believe what just happened, she began, and then poured out the whole story, Harold's foundation, the possibility of a clinic in their own neighborhood, the subsidized housing at Lakeside Gardens, the relocation assistance. Her grandmother was quiet for a long moment after she finished. Child, she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. I always told you that your kindness would come back to you someday. Looks like that day has come. It doesn't seem real, Janelle admitted. 2 days ago I was working double shifts just to afford a plane ticket, and now doors are opening, her grandmother finished for her. That's how blessings work, Janelle. Not always this dramatically, mind you, but they come all the same. Your job is to walk through those doors with your head high, knowing you earned this chance. I will, Nana, and we're going to have a better life. Both of us. We already had a good life, baby, her grandmother reminded her gently. We had love and we had each other. But I won't say no to a nice apartment with an elevator that works and some help with these old bones of mine. Janelle laughed, wiping away tears. I love you, Nana. I love you too, child. Now come on home so we can start packing. The flight back to Memphis was as luxurious as the trip to Chicago had been, but Janelle barely noticed the amenities this time, her mind too full of plans and possibilities. As the plane descended through clouds toward the familiar landscape of home, she felt a curious mixture of emotions: excitement for what lay ahead, affection for the city below with all its flaws and strengths, and profound gratitude for the extraordinary chain of events that had begun with a simple choice to help a stranger in distress. When she stepped off the plane, the Memphis air hit her with its familiar humidity, a stark contrast to Chicago's crisp autumn breeze. For a moment, she felt a pang of doubt. Was she really ready to leave the only home she'd ever known? But then she remembered Harold's words from breakfast. The biggest regrets come not from changes that were difficult, but from changes we were afraid to make. Taking a deep breath, Janelle squared her shoulders and headed toward the exit, ready to begin the next chapter of her story. Behind her, unnoticed, a flight attendant watched her go, then picked up a phone. "Mr. Bennett?" "Yes, she's arrived safely." Seemed deep in thought, but determined. "Yes, sir. I'll make sure the package is delivered to her home tomorrow." "It's been my pleasure." The next morning, a courier arrived at Janelle's small house with a large envelope. Inside was a formal letter from Horizon Airlines Foundation, outlining the preliminary plans for community health assessments in her neighborhood, a brochure for lakeside gardens with her grandmother's subsidy approval already processed, and a handwritten note from Harold. "Janelle, the world bends toward justice, but sometimes it needs a helping hand. Thank you for reminding me of that important truth. Your friend, Harold." Underneath the note was one more item, a first-edition copy of Toni Morrison's Beloved with a simple inscription: "For Janelle, who understands that the best journeys begin with an act of kindness. H.B." Janelle traced the book's cover, with gentle fingers, thinking of how differently things might have turned out if she had hurried past that elderly man in the airport, intent only on her own problems and priorities. One small choice made in a moment of hurry and stress had altered the trajectory of her life in ways she could never have imagined. As she showed the package contents to her grandmother, who exclaimed over the beautiful facilities at Lakeside Gardens, Janelle felt a sense of peace settle over her. The road ahead would still hold challenges, moving cities always did, but for the first time in her adult life, she felt not just hopeful but confident that she was moving in the right direction, with the wind at her back instead of in her face. That evening, she sat on the small porch with her grandmother, watching the neighborhood children play in the fading light. Someday, perhaps not too far in the future, this street might have a clinic where those children could receive quality health care regardless of their family's financial situation. The thought filled her with quiet determination. "What are you thinking about with that serious face?" her grandmother asked, rocking gently in her old chair. Janelle smiled. "I'm thinking that sometimes life takes the strangest turns, and I'm thinking that I need to start making lists. There's so much to do before we move." Her grandmother reached over and patted her hand. "One day at a time, child. That's how all journeys happen. One step, then another, then another." "You're right as always," Janelle agreed. "And our first step is figuring out what to pack and what to leave behind." "Well, we're certainly taking my good china," her grandmother declared. "It may have chips, but it's served every important meal in this family for 40 years, and it's going to serve many more in Chicago." Janelle laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years. "The good china goes to Chicago," she agreed. "And so do we." As darkness fell, Janelle looked up at the stars appearing one by one in the Memphis sky, the same stars that would soon shine over her new life in Chicago. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the strength she'd always had but perhaps never fully recognized, until an elderly stranger had seen it clearly, even in a moment of his own distress. One choice, one moment of kindness, one life transformed, and perhaps many more lives to be touched through the ripples spreading outward from that single decision made in an airport terminal on what had seemed like the worst day of her life, but had proven to be the beginning of something extraordinary. 6 months passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. The Chicago winter had tested Janelle with its biting winds and heavy snows. So different from Memphis's mild winters. But spring was finally emerging, painting the city with delicate green buds and early flowers. Janelle stood by the window, in her office at the clinic, watching patients come and go in the courtyard below. Her name was on the door now. Janelle Williams, RN Patient Care Coordinator. The promotion had come just 3 months after she started, when Dr. Henderson recognized her natural leadership abilities and talent for connecting with difficult patients. A knock at her door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, turning from the window. Alicia, one of the clinic's receptionists, poked her head in. "Ms. Williams, your grandmother just arrived for her appointment, and there's a delivery for you at the front desk." Janelle smiled. "Thanks, Alicia. I'll be right out." She gathered a few files from her desk and headed to the reception area, where her grandmother sat chatting comfortably with another elderly woman. The change in her Nana over these 6 months had been remarkable. Living at Lakeside Gardens, with its social activities and excellent care, she seemed years younger. Her arthritis was better managed with regular physical therapy, and she'd made a close circle of friends who played cards every Tuesday and went to jazz concerts together once a month. "Nana," Janelle called warmly. "Ready for your checkup?" Her grandmother looked up with a bright smile. "Just telling Mrs. Chen here about that garden they're putting in at Lakeside. She should come see it when the weather's better." She rose smoothly, using her cane more for balance than support these days. "What's this I hear about a delivery for you?" Janelle turned to the reception desk where a courier was waiting with a large flat package wrapped in brown paper. "Delivery, for Janelle Williams," he announced, checking his tablet. "Needs a signature." Curious, Janelle signed for the package. It was light but substantial, about 2 feet square. The return address was simply HB Enterprises. "It's from Harold," she told her grandmother. "Let me just take this to my office, and then I'll walk you to Dr. Liu's exam room." "Go on and open it now," her grandmother encouraged. "I'm not in any hurry." Mrs. Chen was just getting to the good part about her grandson's wedding. Smiling at the 2 older women, Janelle carefully unwrapped the package on the reception counter. Inside was a framed black and white photograph of the Memphis skyline at sunset, beautifully matted and professionally framed. Attached to the back was an envelope. Janelle opened it to find a handwritten note on Horizon Airline stationery. "Dear Janelle, I thought your office might need a reminder of home, especially as you prepare for your trip next week. The Foundation Board has unanimously approved the Memphis Clinic project, and we look forward to your input during the planning meetings. On a personal note, my doctors tell me that thanks to your quick thinking 6 months ago, I've made a complete recovery. They seem quite impressed that you recognized the warning signs so quickly. I'm impressed but not surprised. It seems recognizing potential is something we have in common." Your friend Harold. Janelle handed the note to her grandmother, who read it with a growing smile. "That man," she said, shaking her head with affection. "Who would have thought that missing a flight would turn out to be the best thing that ever happened to you?" "Second best," Janelle corrected her. "Having you raise me was the best thing." Her grandmother waved this away, but her eyes shone with pleasure. "Go hang that beautiful picture in your office. I'll wait right here with Mrs. Chen." In her office, Janelle hung the photograph where she could see it from her desk, a reminder not just of where she'd come from, but of where part of her heart would always remain. The planned clinic in Memphis had become her passion project, occupying evenings and weekends as she consulted on community needs, potential services, and staffing requirements. Harold had kept his word about staying in touch. They met for lunch every few weeks, and he'd introduced her to healthcare professionals and community organizers across Chicago. Through him, she'd built a network that stretched far beyond what she could have imagined 6 months ago. Yet he never made her feel like a charity project or an obligation, just a friend whose company he genuinely enjoyed. After getting her grandmother settled with Dr. Liu, Janelle returned to her office to prepare for her afternoon meetings. Her schedule was full: a team meeting about a new diabetes management program, patient consultations, and final preparations for her trip to Memphis next week for the clinic planning sessions. As she reviewed her notes, her phone buzzed with a text from Harold. "Dinner this evening. I have news I'd like to share." The usual place at 7? Janelle smiled and texted back her acceptance. The usual place was a small Italian restaurant halfway between the clinic and lakeside gardens, with excellent food and a quiet atmosphere that allowed for conversation. The day passed in a productive blur. Janelle's role at the clinic had expanded far beyond her original nursing duties. She now managed patient care coordination, helped design community outreach programs, and served as a bridge between the medical staff and the diverse patient population. Dr. Henderson had become both a mentor and friend, pushing Janelle to further her education with courses in healthcare administration that the clinic subsidized. At 6:45, Janelle arrived at the restaurant to find Harold already seated at their regular table by the window. He rose to greet her with a warm handshake and a smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. "Janelle, you look tired but happy. The best combination for someone doing meaningful work." She laughed as she settled into her chair. "It's been a full day, but a good one. Thank you for the beautiful photograph. It's perfect for my office." "I'm glad you like it. A local Memphis photographer took it, part of a series on American cityscapes. Their server appeared with water and menus, though they barely glanced at them, both having settled on favorites after multiple visits. "So," Janelle said after they'd ordered, "you mentioned news?" Harold's eyes twinkled. "Several items, actually. First, the Foundation Board has not only approved the Memphis clinic, but has increased the initial funding by 30% after reviewing your detailed proposal on community needs." Janelle's eyes widened. "That's wonderful. The expanded pediatric services can be included from the beginning." "Exactly," Harold nodded approvingly. "Your passionate advocacy for prenatal and pediatric care made quite an impression. Which leads me to my second piece of news." He took a sip of water before continuing. "The board would like to offer you a position as Director of Community Outreach for the Memphis Clinic project." Janelle stared at him in surprise. "But that would mean moving back to Memphis." "Eventually, yes. Initially, it would involve traveling between Chicago and Memphis as the project develops. Once the clinic opens, you'd be based there full-time." Harold watched her carefully. "It's a significant step up in responsibility. You'd be helping shape the clinic from the ground up, implementing many of the ideas you've advocated for so eloquently." Janelle sat back in her chair, her mind racing. Return to Memphis? 6 months ago, she'd been desperate to leave. Now, the idea of going back, not as the struggling nursing assistant she'd been, but as a director helping create something important for her community, stirred unexpected emotions. "I don't know what to say," she admitted. "You don't need to decide tonight," Harold assured her. "The position won't be formalized until after next week's planning meetings. I simply wanted you to know it was coming so you could begin considering it." Their food arrived, Lynn. Gine with clams for Harold, eggplant parmesan for Janelle. They ate in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Harold spoke again. "There's one more piece of news, of a more personal nature." He set down his fork. "I've decided to retire, fully from Horizon's operations by the end of the year." Janelle looked up in surprise. "Really? But you love being involved with the airline." "I do," Harold agreed. "But I'll be 73 next month, and there comes a time to let the next generation take the controls. I'll remain on the Foundation Board, of course. That work is too important to step away from entirely." He smiled slightly. "Besides, I have other projects I'd like to devote more time to. My grandchildren for one, my garden for another. And there's a book about the early days of commercial aviation that I've been threatening to write for 20 years. "I think that's wonderful," Janelle said sincerely. "Though I hope retirement doesn't mean an end to our lunches." "Far from it," Harold assured her. "In fact, I'll have more time for lunches. And speaking of time..." He hesitated briefly. "Janelle, may I share something rather personal with you?" "Of course. When you found me at the airport 6 months ago, it wasn't the first warning sign I'd experienced. It was, however, the first, one I couldn't ignore." Harold's expression grew serious. "My doctors later told me I was likely headed for a major cardiac event within days, possibly hours. Janelle felt a chill despite the warm restaurant. I had no idea it was that serious. Neither did I, until the tests came back. The truth is, your stopping to help that day likely saved my life. He held up a hand as she began to respond. I know you were simply doing what any decent person with medical training would do. But the fact remains that most people didn't stop. You did. And that single act of compassion changed everything, for me, and as it turns out, for you as, well, he leaned forward slightly. It made me realize how easily our paths might never have crossed. How many meaningful connections we all miss through hurry or indifference. It's made me determined to pay more attention, to create more moments of genuine connection in whatever time I have left. Janelle was touched by his openness. I think that's a beautiful intention. Well, intentions are easy. Following through is the challenge. Harold smiled again. Which brings me to a question. If you do decide to take the position in Memphis, would your grandmother want to return as well? Or has she become too attached to Lakeside Gardens? Janelle considered this. I'm not sure. She's made such good friends there, and her health has improved so much with the care she receives. But Memphis is home. Her church is there. Her sister, so many memories. The reason I ask, Harold said, is that the foundation is in discussions with a senior living community in Memphis about establishing a partnership similar to the one we have with Lakeside Gardens. If your grandmother were interested in returning, she could be part of the initial resident group helping to shape the programs and services. Janelle shook her head in amazement. You really do think of everything, don't you? Not everything. Harold chuckled. Just the important things, like making sure good people have the support they need to do their best work. As their dinner continued, Janelle found her thoughts drifting between Chicago and Memphis, between the life she'd built here and the possibility of returning home in a role she could never have imagined 6 months ago. By the time they finished their meal, no decision had been made, but the seeds had been planted. Harold insisted on driving her home, and as his car pulled up to her apartment building, he turned to her with a gentle smile. Whatever you decide about Memphis, Janelle, know that you've already succeeded in the most important way. You've stayed true to who you are even when the world made that difficult. She returned his smile. I had good examples. My grandmother, and now you. I'm honored to be included in such esteemed company, Harold said with a small bow of his head. Think about the offer. Talk to your grandmother. We'll discuss it more when you're ready. The following week flew by in a flurry of preparations for the Memphis trip. Janelle found herself increasingly excited about returning, even if just for a few days. She'd arranged to stay 2 extra days beyond the planning meetings to visit old friends and see her grandmother's sister. The night before her departure, she sat with her grandmother in the older woman's comfortable apartment at Lakeside Gardens, sharing tea and conversation as they did several times each week. Nana, there's something I need to discuss with you, Janelle began. She explained Harold's offer, the director position at the new Memphis clinic, the possibility of her grandmother joining the senior living community there, the choice they now faced between remaining in Chicago or returning home. Her grandmother listened thoughtfully, her hands cradled around her teacup. When Janelle finished, she was quiet for a long moment. What do you want to do, child? She finally asked. Not what you think I want, or what you think you should do. What does your heart tell you? Janelle took a deep breath. I love the work I'm doing here. Dr. Henderson has been an amazing mentor and I've learned so much, but the idea of helping create something from the ground up, something that would serve our old neighborhood, that's powerful. Sounds like you've already made your decision, her grandmother observed with a small smile. But what about you? Janelle pressed. You've flourished here, Nana. Your health is better, you have friends, activities. And I can have those things in Memphis too, her grandmother pointed out. Especially if this new place is anything like Lakeside. Besides, she added with a twinkle in her eye, I miss proper barbecue. These Chicago folks try, bless their hearts, but they just don't get it right. Janelle laughed. So you wouldn't mind going back? Mind? Child, Memphis is in my bones. I've enjoyed this Chicago adventure, and I'm grateful for everything it's given us. But if you're asking if I'd be happy to go home? Her grandmother reached across the table to take Janelle's hand. I'd be just fine with that. More than fine. The next morning, as Janelle boarded her flight to Memphis, first class again, courtesy of Harold's standing arrangement with Horizon Airlines, she felt a sense of rightness settling over her. Nothing was decided yet, not officially. She would need to see the plans, meet with the foundation team, evaluate the opportunity properly. But in her heart, she already knew. The path that had seemed to lead away from Memphis had been circling back all along, bringing her home not as a retreat, but as a return with purpose. As the plane rose above Chicago's impressive skyline, Janelle thought about the extraordinary chain of events that had brought her to this moment. 6 months ago, running through an airport, focused only on making a flight that seemed her one chance at a better life, a split-second decision to stop and help an elderly man while others hurried past. That one small act of kindness had changed everything. Not because it had been rewarded, though it had, but because it had revealed a truth about who she was and what she valued. In helping Harold Bennett, she had ultimately helped herself find her true path. The flight attendant approached with a warm smile. "Ms. Williams, Mr. Bennett asked me to give you this when we were airborne." She handed Janelle a small envelope. Inside was a card with a simple message in Harold's distinctive handwriting. "As you return to where your journey began, remember that the most important journeys are not about destinations, but about who we become along the way. You helped an old man rediscover his purpose. Now go and fulfill yours. With gratitude and friendship, Harold." Janelle tucked the card carefully into her purse, smiling at how Harold always seemed to find the right words. As the plane soared toward Memphis, she gazed out the window at the vast landscape below, feeling not like someone leaving one life behind for another, but like someone weaving the threads of past and present into a future richer than she could have imagined. One moment of kindness in a busy airport. One decision to see another human being's need as more important than her own immediate concerns. From that single choice had flowed opportunities, friendships, growth, and now, a chance to return home as someone who could make a real difference. The ultimate lesson wasn't about missed flights or second chances, or even successful careers. It was simpler and more profound. That compassion, freely given without expectation of return, has a power all its own to transform not just the lives of others, but our own lives as well. As the plane began its descent toward Memphis, Janelle felt the circle completing. She wasn't the same woman who had left 6 months ago, desperate for escape. She was stronger now, more confident, with a clearer vision of who she was and what she could contribute. She was coming home, not to where. She